My stepdad said I wasn't invited to his lake house anymore. My mom reminded him it was in the trust my grandparents left me. The look on his face was priceless, like someone had just explained gravity to him for the first time. For context, Mom married Gerald 2 years ago after Dad passed. He moved into our family home with all the grace of a conquering general, immediately rearranging furniture and painting over the wallpaper my grandmother had chosen in 1982. Within months, he was calling everything ours except my college fund, which remained stubbornly mine. The lake house situation started when Gerald announced he was hosting his fantasy football league there for the entire Labor Day weekend. Just the guys, he said. Bonding time. No women allowed. I was fine with that until Mom mentioned she wasn't invited either, to her own family's property. The cabin my grandfather built with his own hands, where I'd spent every summer learning to fish and skip stones. It's really more of a man cave situation, Gerald explained, not looking up from his phone. You girls wouldn't enjoy it anyway. Too much testosterone. My mother, who once ran a marathon at 55, just nodded and started planning a spa weekend instead. That's when I made a phone call to the family lawyer. Turns out the trust was ironclad. My grandparents had specifically designated me as the sole beneficiary when I turned 18, which happened 3 months ago. The property couldn't be sold, transferred, or borrowed against without my written consent. Gerald had no legal claim whatsoever. When I told him he'd need my permission to use the lake house, he laughed. Actual laughter. Your mother has power of attorney over your affairs until you're 21, he said smugly. Except she didn't. I'd aged out of that arrangement. The lawyer confirmed it in writing. I sent Gerald the documentation via email with Mom CC'd. His response was a string of texts about disrespect, family unity, and how I was tearing everyone apart over a stupid cabin. Mom called me crying, asking why I couldn't just let him have this one thing. Just this once. Because it's mine, I said. And he's been acting like he owns everything Dad left us. The silence on the other end told me she knew exactly what I meant. Gerald had sold Dad's vintage motorcycle collection without asking, donated his books to Goodwill, replaced his workshop tools with Gerald's own inferior versions. He was erasing my father piece by piece, and she'd let him. I made Gerald an offer. He could use the lake house if he agreed to 3 conditions. 1, my mother was included in all future trips. 2, nothing in the cabin could be altered or removed without my approval. 3, he paid me fair market rental value, which I donate to the Cancer Research Foundation in my father's name. Gerald called me a spoiled brat and said he'd rather vacation in a dumpster than give me a cent. Fine by me. I started planning my own Labor Day weekend at the lake. Mom was invited, obviously. So were Dad's old friends, the ones Gerald had been systematically excluding from family events. I posted pictures of the pristine lake, Dad's old fishing boat, and the sunset from the dock. Tagged the location. Gerald saw every single one. His fantasy football bros spent their weekend at a Motel 6 near the highway. Because Gerald had never bothered booking a backup location, he blamed me, naturally. Told everyone I was vindictive and manipulative, that I'd orchestrated the whole thing to humiliate him. Maybe I had. But watching Mom laugh with Dad's friends, swapping stories on the porch where she'd said her wedding vows 30 years ago, I didn't feel guilty at all. That's when Gerald made his biggest mistake. He showed up at the cabin unannounced with a locksmith. I was inside making coffee when I heard the truck pull up. Through the kitchen window, I watched Gerald climb out with some guy carrying a toolbox. The locksmith looked uncomfortable, kept glancing at Gerald like he wasn't sure about this job. I opened the front door before they reached the porch. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Gerald didn't even look at me. "Fixing a problem," he said. "The locks are old. Need to be replaced for security reasons." The locksmith finally spoke up. "Sir, I'm going to need proof of ownership before I can change anything." I pulled out my phone and showed him the trust documents I'd saved as screenshots. "This property belongs to me. He has no legal authority to change the locks or enter without my permission." The locksmith packed up his tools immediately. "Sorry, man," he said to Gerald. "Can't help you with this one." After the locksmith drove away, Gerald finally looked at me. His face was red, that vein in his forehead pulsing the way it did when Mom forgot to record his TV shows. "You think you're so smart," he said. "You think you've won something here. I think you need to leave my property," I replied. He took a step closer. "Your grandfather would be disgusted by what you've become. Using family against family. He built this place for everyone to enjoy, not for some spoiled little girl to lord over people." "My grandfather built this place for his daughter and granddaughter," I said quietly. "He put it in a trust specifically to protect it from people like you, people who would take and take until there was nothing left of our family." Gerald's jaw clenched. "Your mother is my family now. Then act like it. Stop trying to erase my father. Stop excluding her from things. Stop pretending you own everything he left behind." For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me. His hands balled into fists at his sides. But he just turned and walked back to his truck. As he drove away, I noticed he'd left deep tire tracks in the lawn my grandfather had spent years maintaining, petty and deliberate. I called Mom immediately. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight. "Gerald just called me. He's very upset. He showed up here with a locksmith trying to change my locks," I said. Silence. Then, he wouldn't do that. "Mom, I watched him do it. I have the locksmith's business card if you want to verify." More silence. Finally, she said, "Why do you have to push him like this? Can't you just let him feel like the man of the house?" "The man of the house," I repeated. "That's what this is about? His ego?" "He's trying," she said, her voice cracking. "He's trying to build a life with us, and you keep undermining him." I'm protecting what's mine, I said. What Dad left me. What Grandpa left me. I'm not going to apologize for that. She hung up without saying goodbye. The rest of Labor Day weekend, I stayed at the cabin alone. Mom had gone home after the first night, said she wasn't feeling well. Dad's friends had left that morning with promises to come back soon. The silence felt different now, heavier. I walked through the rooms, touching things my grandfather had made, the bookshelf in the living room, the coat rack by the door, the wooden duck he'd carved for my 8th birthday that still sat on the mantel. Gerald was right about one thing. Grandpa had built this place for family, but he'd also known that sometimes you have to protect what you love from the people who would destroy it. When I got home Tuesday evening, Mom's car was gone. The house felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with the physical space. I found a note on the kitchen counter in her handwriting. Staying at Gerald's apartment for a few days. Need some space to think. That few days turned into a week. Then 2. She'd text occasionally. Short messages. I'm fine. Just need time. Don't worry. But I did worry. I worried she was choosing him over me. Over Dad's memory. Over everything we'd built together as a family. 3 weeks after Labor Day, I came home to find boxes in the living room. Mom's boxes. She was sitting on the couch looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Gerald and I are getting our own place, she said without preamble. Something that's just ours. Okay, I said carefully. When? We found a condo. We're moving in 2 weeks. I sat down across from her. Is this because of the lake house? She looked at me then. Really looked at me. It's because I can't keep living in a museum to your father. Everywhere I turn, there's something that reminds me of him. Gerald needs to feel like he has a place in this family, and he can't do that when everything is still your father's. So he gets to erase Dad completely, I said. That's the solution? No one's erasing anyone, Mom snapped. I'm trying to move forward with my life. I'm allowed to do that. You are, I agreed. But moving forward doesn't mean pretending Dad never existed. It doesn't mean letting Gerald sell his things without asking. It doesn't mean excluding me from decisions about our family property. The lake house isn't our family property, she said tiredly. It's yours. You made that very clear. Because Grandpa left it to me, I said. Because he wanted me to have it. She stood up, started taping one of the boxes closed. Your grandfather left it to you because he didn't trust me to stand up to anyone. He thought I was weak. Turns out he was right. Mom, no, it's fine. I've spent my whole life letting other people make decisions for me. Your grandparents, your father, now you. Maybe Gerald's not perfect, but at least he sees me as an equal partner. An equal partner who tries to break into property that isn't his, I said. She flinched. He made a mistake. He was angry and he made a mistake. Haven't you ever done something stupid when you were upset? I thought about all the times I'd wanted to scream at her over the past 2 years. All the times I'd bitten my tongue when Gerald said something dismissive or cruel. All the times I'd watched her shrink herself to make room for his ego. Yeah, I said finally. I have. Mom moved out 2 weeks later. Gerald hired movers for the big stuff, but she insisted on packing Dad's remaining things herself. She offered to let me keep whatever I wanted. I took his watch, some photos, and the blanket Grandma had knitted for their wedding. Everything else went into storage. The house felt massive and empty with just me in it. I was 18 years old living alone in a 4-bedroom house my parents had bought when I was 3. Every room echoed. Every creak in the floorboards at night made me jump. I considered getting a roommate, but the thought of someone else sleeping in Mom's room or using Dad's study made me feel physically ill. So I stayed alone, working my part-time job at the bookstore and taking online classes at the community college. I deferred my acceptance to the university, told them I needed a gap year. Really, I just couldn't bear to leave yet. Mom invited me to see her new place in October. I drove across town to a modern condo complex with a fountain out front and a doorman who checked my ID. Their unit was on the 8th floor, all clean lines and neutral colors. Nothing like the home I'd grown up in. Gerald answered the door. He didn't smile, just nodded and stepped aside. Mom was in the kitchen unpacking dishes, humming to herself. She looked lighter somehow. Younger. What do you think? She asked, gesturing around. It's nice, I said honestly. Very clean. Gerald picked that paint color, she said, pointing to the pale gray walls. I wanted beige, but he said gray was more sophisticated. I caught Gerald watching me, waiting for my reaction. I kept my face neutral. We ordered Chinese food for dinner, sat around their new dining table making small talk about Mom's work and my classes. Gerald mostly stayed quiet, scrolling through his phone between bites. When Mom got up to get more napkins, he finally spoke to me directly. I know you think I'm trying to replace your father, he said. I'm not. I'm just trying to build a life with your mother. By erasing every trace of him, I replied. By letting her move forward, he corrected. She was drowning in memories. Every room in that house was a reminder of what she lost. Maybe she needed those reminders, I said. Maybe forgetting isn't the same as healing. Gerald set down his phone. You're 18. You don't know anything about loss or healing or what it takes to build a relationship with someone who's been broken. Mom came back before I could respond. She must have heard us because her smile looked forced. More rice, anyone? I left early, claimed I had homework. Mom walked me to the door. Come back soon, she said, hugging me. I miss you. I miss you too, I said. But it felt like I was missing someone who didn't exist anymore. This version of Mom was different, quieter, more careful with her words. Like she was constantly checking to make sure she hadn't said anything wrong. November came and went. Mom invited me to Thanksgiving at her condo. Gerald's brother was coming with his wife and their 3 kids. It would be nice for you to meet everyone, Mom said over the phone. Like we're one big family. I showed up with pie and a smile. Gerald's brother Mitchell turned out to be exactly like Gerald, just with less hair. His wife Candace was pleasant enough, kept asking me about school and boys in that way adults do when they can't think of real conversation. Their kids were loud and destructive, opening cabinets they shouldn't and touching everything despite Candace's weak protests. We sat down to dinner at 4. Gerald said grace, thanking God for bringing this beautiful blended family together. Under the table, I dug my nails into my palms. So, Mitchell said to me between bites of turkey, Gerald tells me you gave him some trouble over a lake house. It's not trouble, I said calmly. It's property that belongs to me, right? But family should share these things. What's yours is mine and all that. Is that how it works in your family? I asked. Your kids can use your house however they want? Change the locks? Exclude you from using your own property? Mitchell laughed uncomfortably. Well, when you put it like that, that's exactly how I put it, I said. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Can we not do this today? I'm just making conversation, I said innocently. Gerald wiped his mouth with his napkin. You're being disrespectful. I'm being honest, I corrected. There's a difference. The rest of dinner was tense. The kids filled the silence with their chaos. I helped Mom clean up while the men watched football in the living room. She didn't say anything, just scrubbed dishes with more force than necessary. On my way out, Gerald caught me in the hallway. You need to stop poisoning your mother against me, he said quietly. I'm not doing anything, I said. You make her feel guilty every time she chooses me over your father's memory. It's not fair to her. What's not fair is you trying to rewrite history, I said. Dad existed. He was her husband for 28 years. You don't get to pretend those years didn't happen just because it makes you uncomfortable. Gerald's face went red. I've been nothing but patient with you. Nothing but understanding. But you're a spoiled, vindictive little girl who can't stand seeing her mother happy. I'm a daughter watching her mother erase her own past to make a man feel important, I said. If that makes me vindictive, fine. I drove home, shaking, called my friend Brooke and ranted for an hour about Gerald and Mom and the whole impossible situation. She listened, made sympathetic noises, and finally said, Have you considered that maybe your mom is actually happy? The question stopped me cold. I mean, Brooke continued, maybe this is what she needs right now. To not be the widow. To not be defined by loss. But she's losing herself, I said. Or maybe she's finding a different version of herself. One you don't recognize yet. I thought about that conversation for weeks. Replayed it every time Mom called with stories about her new life. How Gerald had surprised her with flowers. How they'd gone dancing. How she'd laughed so hard at dinner with his friends that wine came out her nose. She did sound happy. Lighter. Less weighted down by grief. But every time I visited, I noticed something else missing. The photo of Dad that used to be her phone background had been replaced with one of her and Gerald. The anniversary card Dad had written her months before he died was no longer magneted to the fridge. The coffee mug he'd gotten her from their trip to Seattle had been replaced with a generic one from Target. Little erasures. Death by 1,000 cuts. Christmas came and Mom invited me to celebrate at the condo. Just the 3 of us this time. I showed up with gifts and low expectations. Gerald had put up a tree, all silver and white decorations. Nothing like the colorful chaos of our old family tree with ornaments I'd made in elementary school, and the angel Grandma had given us before she died. We exchanged presents. Mom got me a gift card to the bookstore and a sweater I'd never wear. I got her a framed photo of us from when I was 10, both of us laughing at something off camera. She looked at it for a long time before setting it aside. That's sweet, she said. Thank you. Gerald had gotten me nothing. Said he wasn't sure what I'd like. I hadn't gotten him anything either. After dinner, Mom pulled out old photo albums. Started showing Gerald pictures from when I was little. There's her first day of kindergarten. There's the vacation to Disney World. There's her dance recital. She was cute, Gerald said without much interest. She still is, Mom said, squeezing my hand. But as she flipped through the pages, I noticed she skipped over all the ones with Dad in them. Just turned them quickly without comment. Like he was a ghost, even in photographs. Can I see those? I asked, reaching for the album. Mom's grip tightened on it. Maybe later. These old photos always make me sad. They're part of our history, I said. I know that, she said sharply. But tonight is about our present. Our future. Can we just focus on that? So I let it go. Sat through the rest of the evening watching Mom perform happiness while Gerald checked his phone. Drove home through empty streets wondering how everything had gotten so broken. January brought snow and a letter from the university. They needed to know if I planned to enroll for the spring semester or if I wanted to defer again. I stared at the letter for days, unable to decide. Staying meant living alone in that echoing house. Going meant leaving everything behind. I finally called Mom to talk it through. She answered on the 4th ring, slightly out of breath. Bad time, I asked. No. Just got back from the gym. What's up? I told her about the letter, about my uncertainty. You should go, she said immediately. You're too young to be living alone in that big house. You should be meeting people, having experiences, living your life. What about the house, I asked. Sell it, she said simply, or rent it out. You don't need to be tied to it. That house is our home, I said. Was our home, she corrected gently. Now it's just a building full of memories. And memories can be poison if you let them. Not all memories are bad, I said. No, but sometimes holding onto them too tightly keeps you from moving forward. Your father wouldn't want you putting your life on hold because of him. How do you know what Dad would want? I asked before I could stop myself. Silence on the other end. Then, that's not fair. None of this is fair, I said. You get to move on and build a new life while I'm stuck being the keeper of all our memories. The only one who seems to remember Dad existed. I think about your father every single day, Mom said quietly. But I also have to live. I have to wake up every morning and find a reason to keep going. Gerald gives me that reason. And what happens when Gerald decides something else of Dad's needs to go? I asked. What happens when he gets tired of you having a past? That won't happen, she said. How do you know? Because I won't let it, she said firmly. I'm not as weak as you think I am. I've never thought you were weak, I said. I've thought you were grieving. There's a difference. She sighed. Maybe you should come stay with us for a few days. We can talk about this properly. Not over the phone. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. Why not? Because I can't watch you pretend Dad never existed anymore. I can't sit in your perfect new condo with your perfect new life and act like everything's fine when you've erased 30 years of history. I haven't erased anything, Mom said, her voice rising. I've made room for something new. That's not the same thing. Feels the same from where I'm sitting, I said. Then maybe you need to change where you're sitting, she snapped. Maybe you need to grow up and realize that life moves on whether you want it to or not. She hung up before I could respond. We didn't speak for 3 weeks after that, the longest silence we'd ever had. I enrolled in the spring semester at the university, found a roommate through a Facebook group, and started packing up the house. Each box felt like admitting defeat. I was wrapping dishes when I found Dad's favorite mug. Navy blue with property of world's best dad printed in fading white letters. I'd given it to him for Father's Day when I was 9. He'd used it every single morning for years. I sat on the kitchen floor holding that mug and cried for the first time since his funeral. Not pretty crying either. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and jagged. The kind that leaves you exhausted and empty. My phone rang. Mom's name lit up the screen. I answered but couldn't speak. Just kept crying. Baby, she said. Oh baby, what's wrong? I managed to choke out something about the mug, about how everything was disappearing, about how I felt like I was losing both of them. Give me your address, Mom said. I'm coming over. You don't have to, I said. Yes, I do. I'm your mother and you're hurting and I'm coming over. She arrived 40 minutes later, let herself in with the key she'd never returned, found me still sitting on the kitchen floor surrounded by half-packed boxes and crumpled newspaper. She sat down next to me without a word, put her arm around my shoulders. We stayed like that until I stopped crying. I'm sorry, I finally said. I'm sorry too, she said. I've been so focused on moving forward that I forgot you're still processing everything. You're allowed to grieve at your own pace. I feel like I'm the only one who remembers him, I said. You're not, Mom said firmly. Gerald doesn't replace your father. He can't. He's just a different chapter in my life. It feels like you're trying to erase the old chapters, I said. Mom picked up the mug I'd been holding, ran her fingers over the faded letters. You know what your dad said when you gave him this? What? He said it was the best gift he'd ever received. Not because it was expensive or fancy, but because you'd used your allowance to buy it. He said it meant you understood what mattered to him, that you saw him. She handed me the mug. I'm not trying to erase him. I'm trying to survive losing him. And sometimes survival looks like moving on before you're ready. Sometimes it looks like building something new because the old thing is too painful to touch. I get that, I said. But from where I sit, it looks like you're choosing Gerald over Dad's memory, over me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I'm not choosing between you. I'm trying to make space for both. But it's so hard when you act like loving Gerald means I didn't love your father. Like I'm betraying him by being happy. Are you happy? I asked. Most days, she said. Some days I feel guilty for being happy. But yeah, mostly I am. We sat in silence for a while. Then Mom started helping me pack. She wrapped dishes carefully, placed them in boxes marked with rooms they'd never see again. When she found Dad's things, she didn't turn away. She held them, told me stories I'd never heard before. About their first apartment, their first fight, the way he used to sing in the shower even though he couldn't carry a tune. Keep this, she said, handing me Dad's old MIT sweatshirt. He'd want you to have it. What about you? I asked. She pulled something from her purse. A small notebook with Dad's handwriting inside. Lists of things to remember, appointments, random thoughts. I've kept this, she said. I read it sometimes when I miss him, when I need to hear his voice. Does Gerald know you have that? I asked. She smiled sadly. Gerald knows there are parts of me that will always belong to your father. He accepted that when he married me. It's not always easy for him, but he tries. We ordered pizza and stayed up late talking. Really talking for the first time in months. She told me about her life with Gerald. The good parts and the hard parts. How he sometimes got jealous of memories. How she had to remind him that loving him didn't mean forgetting Dad. How they were working through it in couples counseling. We're all just trying to figure this out, she said. There's no rule book for blending a life with someone new when you've lost someone you loved. We mess up. We hurt each other. But we're trying. I told her about feeling abandoned. About watching her erase Dad from the house. About Gerald's attempts to take over the lake house. She listened without defending him, which felt important. He shouldn't have done that, she said when I finished. The lake house thing. That was wrong and I told him so. He apologized, for what it's worth. He didn't apologize to me, I pointed out. No, she admitted. He didn't. And that's something we need to address. She left around midnight with promises to visit more often, to include me more, to stop avoiding Dad's memory around Gerald. At the door, she hugged me tight. "I love you," she said. "More than anything. That hasn't changed." "I love you too," I said. After she left, I looked around at the half-packed boxes. The house that would soon belong to someone else. The life I was leaving behind. It felt less terrifying than it had that morning. Like maybe moving forward wasn't the same as forgetting. Like maybe you could carry the past with you without drowning in it. I moved into the dorms in late January. My roommate Kendra was a sophomore studying biology, originally from Portland. She had posters of bands I'd never heard of and a pet fish named Dr. Fishenstein. We got along immediately. She didn't ask too many questions about why I'd taken a gap year, just helped me unpack and invited me to a party that weekend. The university felt overwhelming at first. So many people. So much noise and movement and life happening all at once. I'd spent months alone in that quiet house and suddenly I was surrounded by humanity again. It was exhausting and exhilarating. Mom called every few days, asked about classes and friends and whether I was eating enough. Normal mom things. Gerald would sometimes get on the line to say hello, his voice carefully friendly. I remained polite but distant. We were finding an uneasy peace. In March, Mom called with unexpected news. They were thinking about getting a dog, something small and low maintenance. What did I think? "I think that sounds nice," I said honestly. "Gerald thinks it would be good for us," she said. "Something to take care of together." The old me would have pointed out that Dad had always wanted a dog, but Mom said they were too much work. The old me would have turned it into proof that she cared more about Gerald's wants than she ever had about Dad's. But I was trying to be better, to let her have this new life without constant comparison. "That's great, Mom," I said. "Let me know when you get one. I'd love to meet them." She paused, like she'd been expecting a fight. "Thank you," she said quietly. They ended up with a rescue beagle named Charlie. Mom sent me pictures constantly. Charlie sleeping on the couch, Charlie stealing Gerald's slippers, Charlie howling along with the TV. She looked happier in those photos than she had in years. I went home for spring break. Home being their condo, not the house I'd grown up in. Some family had bought it in February, were planning to repaint and modernize. I drove by once and saw a dumpster in the driveway filled with what looked like our old kitchen cabinets. It hurt less than I expected. Charlie greeted me at the door with enthusiastic barking and a wagging tail. Gerald had put on weight, looked softer around the edges, less angry. He shook my hand, asked about school, and actually listened to the answer. Mom made my favorite dinner, lasagna with garlic bread and Caesar salad. We ate at the dining table, Charlie begging at our feet. Gerald told a story about the dog getting loose in their building and ending up in a neighbor's apartment. Mom laughed until she snorted. It felt almost normal. After dinner, Mom pulled out photo albums again, but this time she didn't skip the pictures with Dad in them. She told Gerald stories about each one. There's our wedding day. There's when we bought the house. There's the trip to Yellowstone where it rained the entire time. Gerald looked at each photo carefully, asked questions, laughed at the funny stories. He was trying. It was obvious and awkward but genuine. "He loved you a lot," Gerald said, looking at a picture of Mom and Dad dancing at someone's wedding. "You can see it in how he's looking at you." "He did," Mom said simply. "Very much." "That must make this hard," Gerald said, moving forward with me. Mom reached over and took his hand. "It's different, not harder. You're not competing with him. You're just the next chapter." I excused myself, went to the bathroom, and cried quietly. Not from sadness exactly, from something more complicated. Relief, maybe, or release. The understanding that people can hold multiple truths at once. That Mom could love Dad and also love Gerald. That moving forward didn't have to mean forgetting. When I came back, they were on the couch with Charlie between them. Gerald had his arm around Mom's shoulders. She was leaning into him, looking content. They made room for me without being asked. We watched some cooking show neither of them cared about. Charlie snored. The city lights twinkled outside the window. It wasn't the family I'd grown up with, but it was something. A new shape built from pieces of the old. Before I left to go back to school, Gerald asked if he could speak to me privately. We stood in the hallway outside their unit, the sound of someone's TV bleeding through the walls. "I owe you an apology," he said, "for the lake house, for trying to change the locks, for a lot of things." I waited. "When I married your mother, I thought I could just step into this ready-made life, be the husband and father figure and fix everything that was broken. But you weren't broken. You were grieving. There's a difference and I didn't understand that." "Okay," I said. "The lake house is yours. Your grandfather was smart to protect it that way. I was wrong to try to take it from you. I appreciate that," I said. He shifted uncomfortably. "Your mother loves you more than anything. More than me, if I'm honest. And that's how it should be. I'm not trying to replace your father. I'm just trying to love your mother the best way I know how. I think she knows that," I said. "But do you?" I looked at this man who had steamrolled into our lives, erased my father's memory, sold his things, and tried to take what wasn't his, who had made my mother choose between her past and her present, who had called me vindictive and spoiled. I also saw someone who was trying, who went to therapy with Mom, who looked at old photos even when it clearly made him uncomfortable, who had gained weight because Mom cooked comfort food and he ate it to make her happy, who had given her a reason to smile again. "I'm working on it," I told him honestly. "That's fair," he said. We shook hands. It felt anticlimactic and profound at the same time. The rest of the semester flew by. I made friends, joined a book club, started dating a guy named Philip who studied engineering and played guitar badly. Nothing serious but nice, uncomplicated. Mom and I fell into a better rhythm. Video calls every week, text messages throughout the day. She sent me care packages with homemade cookies and notes in her handwriting. Gerald sometimes added his own notes at the bottom, usually jokes or comments about whatever sports team was playing. They were never funny, but I appreciated the effort. In May, I invited them both to campus for a spring festival. Gerald wore dad jeans and a polo shirt, looked completely out of place among the college kids. Mom brought her camera and took 1,000 pictures. They met Kendra and Philip, ate overpriced food truck tacos, watched the terrible band that played at the quad. I caught Mom watching me during one of Philip's stories, this soft look on her face. When our eyes met, she mouthed, "I'm proud of you." Not for anything specific, just for surviving, for moving forward, for building a life. That summer, I spent 2 weeks at the lake house. Invited Mom and Gerald for a weekend. They came bearing groceries and board games. Gerald caught 3 fish and threw them all back. Mom lounged on the dock reading romance novels. We played cards at night and drank beer. Gerald insisted on buying, even though I was only 19. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset, Gerald said something that surprised me. "Your grandfather did a good job with this place. It's special. He loved it here," I said. Gerald nodded. "Your mother told me he taught you to fish from that dock, that he built the boathouse with his own hands." "He did," I said. "Took him 2 summers. "That's real craftsmanship," Gerald said. "These days everything's prefab and disposable. It's nice that places like this still exist." Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you protected this," she said. "Your grandfather would be proud." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the tree line, painting the lake in shades of orange and pink. It wasn't the family I'd imagined having, but it was real and imperfect and trying, and maybe that was enough. My sophomore year started in August. New classes, new challenges. I switched my major to education, decided I wanted to teach high school English. Kendra and I got an off-campus apartment, small and drafty but ours. Philip and I broke up amicably when he transferred schools. I dated a girl named Quinn for a few months. That didn't work out either, but I learned things about myself. Mom and Gerald got married in a small ceremony that September. Not a big wedding, just close friends and family at the courthouse, followed by dinner at their favorite restaurant. Mom wore a simple blue dress. Gerald wore a suit that fit him properly for once. They asked me to be a witness. I signed the papers with a steady hand. At dinner, Gerald gave a short toast, thanked everyone for being there, talked about how lucky he felt to have found love again later in life. Then he turned to me. "I know this hasn't been easy," he said. "Blending families never is. But I want you to know that I see you as family now. Not trying to be your father, but hoping to be someone you can count on." Mom had tears in her eyes. I raised my glass. "To new chapters," I said. "To new chapters." Everyone echoed. Later, Mom pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said, "for being here, for trying. I know it hasn't been easy." "You keep saying that," I said, "like it's supposed to be easy. Isn't it supposed to be?" "I don't think anything worth doing is easy," I said. "Dad used to say that. Remember?" She smiled through her tears. "He did. Usually when he was trying to assemble furniture and failing, or when he was teaching me to drive," I added, "or when he was explaining calculus, or basically any time something was hard." "He was right, though," Mom said. "The hard things are usually the important things." We hugged for a long time. Other diners probably thought something terrible had happened, but it was the opposite. Something good was happening, something that had taken 2 years of fighting and pain and slowly learning to let go. Gerald joined us, looking uncertain. "Can I?" he started. Mom pulled him into the hug. The 3 of us stood there in the corner of a too-loud restaurant, holding on to each other. It was messy and complicated and nothing like the family I'd grown up with, but it was something, and something was better than nothing. Junior year brought new challenges, harder classes, student teaching placements, the constant pressure of figuring out what came next. I went home less frequently, busy with assignments and social obligations. But Mom and I talked constantly, real conversations about real things. She told me when she and Gerald fought, when he left dishes in the sink even though he knew it drove her crazy, when she got annoyed at his snoring, the mundane struggles of any marriage. It felt more honest than the perfect facade she'd maintained earlier. I told her about struggling in my practicum, about the student who called me a bitch, about my professor who said I needed to command more authority, about questioning whether I was even cut out for teaching. "You'll figure it out," Mom said. "You're just finding your voice. That takes time." "What if I never find it?" I asked. "Then you'll find something else," she said simply. "There's no rule that says you have to have everything figured out at 21. Dad had everything figured out," I said. "He knew what he wanted to be when he was 16. Mom laughed. "Your father changed his major 3 times in college, dropped out for a semester to work construction, didn't actually graduate until he was 25. He just didn't talk about that part." "Really?" "Really. He liked to pretend he'd always had a plan, but mostly he just kept moving forward until things fell into place." "I wish I'd known that," I said. "There's a lot about your father?" "I wish I'd told you," Mom said quietly. "I got so caught up in grief that I forgot you deserve to know the whole person, not just the perfect memory." "Tell me now," I said. So she did. Over the next few months, she shared stories I'd never heard, about Dad's mistakes and failures, his stubbornness and his fears, the time he got fired from his first job for arguing with his boss, The year he fell into a depression and barely left the house. The ways he wasn't perfect. It made him more real somehow. Less a saint and more a person. Someone who struggled and survived and built a life despite not having all the answers. In December of my junior year, I brought Quinn back to meet Mom and Gerald. Quinn was nervous, kept fidgeting with her hair in the car. I told Mom I was seeing someone but hadn't mentioned she was a girl. I wasn't sure how they'd react. They were perfect. Gerald shook Quinn's hand with the same firm grip he gave everyone. Mom hugged her and immediately started asking about her major and her family and her favorite foods. Charlie loved her instantly, followed her around the entire visit. Over dinner, Quinn told stories about her large Italian family in New Jersey. Gerald countered with stories about growing up with 5 brothers in Michigan. Mom mostly listened, smiling at the easy way Quinn fit into the conversation. After Quinn went to bed in the guest room, Mom found me in the kitchen getting water. "She's lovely," Mom said. "Thanks," I said. "You seem happy." "I am," I said. "Mostly." Mom leaned against the counter. "I'm glad you brought her to meet us, that you trust us enough to share this part of your life. Did you know," I asked, "that I liked girls?" "I suspected," Mom said, "but I was waiting for you to tell me in your own time. And you're okay with it? Honey, I want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. Boy, girl, neither, both, I don't care. As long as they treat you well and make you laugh." I hugged her then, held onto her like I used to when I was small, and the world felt too big. She held me back just as tight. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "Better than okay. You're going to be amazing." Senior year arrived with terrifying speed. Suddenly, I was applying for teaching jobs, taking the state certification exam, preparing to enter the real world. Quinn and I had broken up over the summer, stayed friends. I was single and stressed and constantly one bad grade away from a breakdown. Mom called one night in October when I was particularly overwhelmed. I answered crying about a lesson plan that had gone disastrously wrong during student teaching. The kids had ignored me completely, threw paper airplanes while I tried to discuss themes in Romeo and Juliet. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," I said through tears. "You are," Mom said firmly. "You just need to find what works for you." Dad used to say teaching is 50% content and 50% performance. You have to command the room. How did he know that? I asked. He was an engineer. Because he volunteered at the elementary school when you were little, helped with the science fair and career day. He bombed the first time. Kids were crawling under tables while he tried to explain circuits. What did he do? He bought a robot kit and let them build something. Turned out they learned more by doing than by listening to him talk. Sometimes you have to throw out the plan and meet them where they are. I thought about that the next day during my placement. Instead of lecturing about symbolism in Lord of the Flies, I had them create social media profiles for the characters. Suddenly, they were engaged, arguing about what Ralph would post versus Jack. The lesson went 20 minutes over because they didn't want to stop. My supervising teacher pulled me aside after. "That was excellent," she said. "You found your angle." I called Mom that night to tell her. She answered on the first ring, Gerald talking loudly about some game in the background. "It worked," I said. "Your advice worked." "Dad's advice," she corrected. "But I'm glad it helped." "Tell him thank you for me," I said. "I think he knows," Mom said softly. I graduated in May with my teaching certification and 3 job offers. Took a position at a high school 20 minutes from the university teaching English and creative writing. Mom and Gerald came to my graduation, sat in the nosebleed seats for 3 hours, waiting for them to call my name. Mom cried. Gerald took 1,000 photos on a camera he didn't quite know how to use. We went to dinner after at a steakhouse Gerald insisted on paying for. He ordered champagne even though I told him it was too expensive. We toasted to new beginnings and futures and all the possibilities ahead. "So what comes next?" Gerald asked. "I start teaching in August," I said. "Until then, I'm probably going to panic and doubt every life choice I've ever made." "Sounds about right," Mom said, laughing. "You're going to be great," Gerald said. "Those kids are lucky to have you." I looked at him, this man who had barged into my life and disrupted everything, who had tried to erase my father and take what wasn't his, who had made my mother choose and my life complicated, who was now sitting across from me, genuine pride in his eyes, celebrating my success like it was his own. "Thanks, Gerald," I said. "That means a lot." His face did something complicated, softened and tightened at the same time. For a second, I thought he might cry. Then he cleared his throat and changed the subject to something about baseball. That summer, I moved into my own apartment, small 1-bedroom near the school where I'd be teaching. Mom helped me shop for furniture. Gerald helped assemble it, only swearing moderately when the dresser pieces didn't fit together like the instructions claimed. They left me with a fully furnished apartment, a fridge stocked with food I wouldn't eat before it expired, and a card with money they insisted I take for emergencies. Mom hugged me at the door. "Call if you need anything," she said. "Day or night. We're here." "I know," I said. "And come visit when you can. Charlie misses you." "I'll miss Charlie too," I said, grinning. Gerald cleared his throat. "You know what I mean." "I do," I said. "And I'll visit. I promise." My first year teaching nearly killed me. The hours were endless. The bureaucracy was mind-numbing. The kids were challenging and brilliant and exhausting all at once. I called Mom crying at least once a week. She talked me through lesson plans and parent conferences, and the special kind of exhaustion that comes from giving everything you have every single day. Gerald sent care packages, coffee and chocolate and stupid motivational posters. Once he sent a stress ball shaped like a brain with a note that said, "Squeeze this," instead of screaming. It made me laugh so hard I cried. I visited them for Thanksgiving, brought my disaster of a green bean casserole that Gerald ate 3 helpings of despite it being objectively terrible. We watched football and played with Charlie and talked about everything and nothing. Mom looked older somehow, grayer, more tired, but happy. Genuinely happy. In January, I got a call at 2 a.m. Mom's number lit up my phone and my stomach dropped immediately. No one calls at 2 a.m. with good news. "It's Gerald," Mom said, her voice shaking. "He had a heart attack. We're at the hospital." I got there in 30 minutes, broke probably a dozen traffic laws, found Mom in the surgical waiting room, her face pale and drawn. She grabbed me when she saw me, held on like I might disappear. "They're doing emergency surgery," she said. "He collapsed at home." I called 911 and they said if I hadn't been there, if I'd been asleep. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. We sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs for 6 hours, drank terrible coffee, watched the sun come up through the waiting room windows. Finally, a doctor came out still in surgical gear. "He's stable," the doctor said. "It was a significant blockage, but we got it cleared. He'll need cardiac rehab and lifestyle changes, but he should make a full recovery." Mom collapsed against me crying. I held her and stared at the institutional beige walls and felt something shift in my chest. This man I'd spent years resenting, who'd disrupted my entire life, who I'd slowly learned to tolerate and then respect and finally care about, had almost died. And the idea of him not existing anymore made me feel hollow. "Can we see him?" I asked. The doctor nodded. "He's pretty groggy, but yes. Follow me." Gerald looked small in the hospital bed, older than I'd ever seen him, tubes and wires everywhere. But his eyes opened when we came in, and he managed a weak smile. "Hey," he croaked. "Hey yourself," Mom said, taking his hand. "You scared the hell out of me. Sorry about that," he said. I stood at the foot of the bed, suddenly unsure what to say. Gerald looked at me. "Thanks for coming," he said. "Where else would I be?" I replied. His eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know if you'd—" He didn't finish. Neither of us acknowledged what he'd been about to say, that he hadn't known if I'd come, if I cared enough about him to show up in the middle of the night, but I was here. And that said everything that needed saying. Gerald stayed in the hospital for a week. I took personal days from school, the first I'd ever used. Stayed with Mom at the hospital during the day, helped coordinate his care, ran interference with doctors and nurses. At night, I went back to their condo to feed Charlie and water plants and sleep in their guest room. In the quiet hours, I looked through their photo albums, pictures of Gerald and Mom I'd never seen, their courthouse wedding, vacation photos from places they'd been together, Gerald laughing at something off camera, Mom looking at him with unmistakable affection. There were newer photos too, the 3 of us at my graduation, Christmas at their condo, that weekend at the lake house. In every single one, we looked like what we were, a family. Not the one I'd started with, but a family nonetheless. When Gerald came home, the doctor gave strict instructions. Cardiac diet, no stress, regular exercise. Mom transformed into a drill sergeant, monitoring his food and forcing him on walks even when he complained. I came over on weekends to help, cooking heart-healthy meals from recipes I found online. One Saturday, while Mom was at the store and Gerald was resting on the couch, we talked. Really talked for the first time. "I thought I was dying," he said quietly, in the ambulance. "And all I could think was that I never made things right with you. You were trying," I said. "Not hard enough," he countered. "I knew how you felt about me. I knew I disrupted your life, but I was too proud to really apologize. Too invested in being right. We all were," I said. "Me included." He shifted on the couch, wincing slightly. "Your father was a good man. I've never tried to replace him, but I did try to erase him. I thought it would be easier for your mom if she wasn't constantly reminded of what she'd lost." "Was it?" I asked. "No," he said. "It just made her feel guilty for moving on, like she had to choose between her past and her present." We sat in silence for a moment. Charlie snored on the floor between us. "I'm sorry," Gerald said, "for all of it. The lake house. Your dad's things. Making you feel like you had to fight for your own memories." "I'm sorry too," I said, "for being so angry, for making it harder than it needed to be." "You had every right to be angry," he said. "I barged into your life and tried to take over. That wasn't fair." "No," I agreed. "But you also made my mom happy again. That counts for something." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a chance, even when I didn't deserve one." "Your family," I said simply. "Family gets chances." His face did that complicated thing again, the emotion he wasn't quite sure how to express. Then Mom came home with bags of groceries and the moment passed. But something had shifted between us. Some final wall had crumbled. We weren't father and daughter, probably never would be, but we were something. People who loved the same person and were learning to love each other by extension. Spring arrived with Gerald's slow recovery. He went to cardiac rehab 3 times a week, lost 30 pounds, complained constantly about the food Mom prepared, but he followed doctor's orders and gradually got stronger. I finished my first year of teaching, exhausted but intact. My students had learned something despite my constant certainty that I was failing. Several wrote me thank you cards on the last day. One said I'd made her love reading again. I cried in my empty classroom after they left. That summer, I went back to the lake house for 2 weeks. Invited Mom and Gerald for the whole stay. Gerald caught a dozen fish and threw them all back. Mom finished 6 novels. We played cards every night and drank wine on the dock and talked about everything and nothing. One evening, Gerald asked if I'd ever thought about what would happen to the lake house eventually. When I die, you mean, I said. Eventually, he said carefully, but also if you ever want to sell it. Or if you need money for something. I've thought about it, I admitted. Grandpa wanted me to have it, but he also would have wanted me to use it, share it, not just hold on to it because he left it to me. What are you thinking? Mom asked. I'm thinking maybe we establish it as a family property. Put it in a trust that includes all of us, so your kids would have access too, if you have kids. Mom and I stared at him. Your kids, I repeated. Well, yeah, Gerald said. I assumed you'd have kids eventually, and they should know about this place, about your family's history. I hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't pictured myself as a parent with children who needed to know where they came from. I started. That's actually a really good idea. We spent the rest of the evening planning it out, how the trust would work, who would maintain the property, how future generations would access it. Gerald took notes on a yellow legal pad, his handwriting surprisingly neat. Your grandfather would like this, Mom said, knowing the place would stay in the family, that it wasn't just about you, but about everyone who comes after. I think you're right, I said. We filed the paperwork that fall, established the family trust with all 3 of us as trustees. The lake house officially belonged to all of us now, and someday to whoever came next. My second year teaching was easier. I knew the curriculum, understood the students, had systems in place. I even started an after-school creative writing club. 6 students showed up the first week. By December, I had 20. Mom and Gerald visited for the school's winter concert. I'd help students write and perform original poetry. They sat in the back row of the auditorium and watched teenagers stumble through verses about love and loss and identity. Afterward, Gerald shook every student's hand, told them their work mattered. Several of them looked stunned. A few cried. He's good at this, one of my students said. Your dad? He's not my dad, I corrected automatically. Then I saw Gerald's face, the quick flash of hurt before he covered it. He's my stepdad, I amended. But yeah, he's pretty great. The smile Gerald gave me could have lit the entire building. Years passed in the way they do. I taught. Mom and Gerald traveled. We had holidays together, regular dinners, phone calls that lasted hours. Gerald had another health scare in my 4th year teaching. Not as serious, but scary enough. Mom fell and broke her wrist. I went through a series of relationships that didn't work out. Life happened. When I was 26, I met Denise at a teacher training conference. She taught history at a school across town, had a laugh that made everyone in the room turn to look. We got coffee after the conference ended, then dinner. Then she stayed over at my apartment and didn't leave for 3 days. 6 months later, I brought her to meet Mom and Gerald. They loved her immediately. Charlie loved her immediately. She fit into our family like she'd always been there, telling stories and asking questions and making everyone laugh. That night, after Denise had gone home, Mom pulled me aside. She's the one, isn't she? Mom said. I think so, I admitted. Your father would have liked her, Mom said. He always said you'd end up with someone who made you laugh until you couldn't breathe. I remember that, I said. He said that about you too. Mom smiled. He was right. I proposed to Denise 6 months later. Nothing fancy. Just the 2 of us at the lake house watching the sunrise. She said yes before I finished asking the question. We set the wedding date for the following June at the lake. Mom and Gerald helped with everything. Gerald handled the logistics while Mom focused on the details. Invitations and flowers and making sure every single thing was perfect. Denise's large Puerto Rican family descended on our small town like a joyful hurricane. Her mother and my mother became instant friends, bonding over wedding stress and overbearing relatives. The night before the wedding, Mom found me on the dock where Grandpa had taught me to fish. She sat down beside me, both of us dangling our feet over the water. Nervous, she asked. Terrified, I admitted. That's normal, Mom said. Marriage is terrifying. You're promising your entire life to someone, hoping they'll still love you when you're old and wrinkled and annoying. Did you feel this way before you married Dad? I asked. Absolutely, she said. I almost called it off 3 times. Your grandmother had to talk me down. Really? Really. I was 22 and convinced I was too young, that I didn't know enough about life or myself or what I wanted. But your father was patient. He told me we'd figure it out together. And did you? I asked. Mostly, Mom said. Some days we failed spectacularly, but we kept trying. That's all marriage is really. Waking up every day and choosing each other again. What about Gerald? I asked. Is it different the second time? Yes and no, Mom said thoughtfully. I knew myself better when I married Gerald. Knew what I needed and what I couldn't compromise on. But I also knew how much it hurts to lose someone. That made it scarier in some ways. Do you wish Dad was here? I asked. Every single day, Mom said. But I'm also glad I have Gerald. Your father would want me to be happy, just like he'd want you to be happy. I think Denise makes me happy, I said. I know she does, Mom said. I can see it in how you are with her, how easy it is. That's what I want for you. Someone who makes life feel less heavy. We sat in comfortable silence watching the moon reflect on the water. Finally, Mom stood up and offered me her hand. Come on, she said. Let's get you married tomorrow. The wedding was perfect, despite everything that went wrong. The flowers arrived in the wrong color. The caterer forgot half the appetizers. Gerald's brother showed up drunk, but none of it mattered. Not really. Denise looked stunning walking down the aisle toward me. Mom cried through the entire ceremony. Gerald handed me tissues at exactly the right moments. Our friends and family filled the lawn by the lake house, spilling onto the dock and into the boats. The ceremony itself was short. We'd written our own vows, promised to be kind and patient and honest even when it was hard. When the officiant said I could kiss my bride, everyone cheered so loudly birds scattered from the trees. Charlie howled from inside the house where we'd locked him to keep him from interrupting. It was chaos and joy and everything I'd never known I wanted. At the reception, Gerald gave a toast. He talked about family and second chances and how love doesn't follow rules. How the family you build can be just as important as the family you're born into. How grateful he was to be part of ours. Then he looked directly at me. I didn't know if I'd ever belong here, he said. Your father built something beautiful with your mother, left behind a daughter who fought like hell to protect his memory. I thought there was no room for me in that story. His voice cracked. But you made room, even when I didn't deserve it, even when I made it harder than it needed to be. You let me be part of this family, and I want you to know that's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. I was crying before he finished. So was everyone else. Even Denise's tough-as-nails brother was wiping his eyes. We danced until the stars came out. Mom and Gerald swayed together to old songs. Denise's parents taught everyone salsa steps they were definitely too drunk to execute properly. My students, both current and former, made a complicated scene trying to start a conga line. Late into the night, I found Gerald sitting alone at one of the tables. I sat down next to him. Thank you, I said. For what? For everything, I said. For loving my mom, for putting up with me, for becoming family. He smiled. Thank you for letting me. We sat watching everyone dance. The lake house glowed with lights. Music drifted across the water. This place that Grandpa built, that he left to me, that I'd fought to protect. It had become something bigger than any one person. It held my past and present and future all at once. Do you think he'd approve? I asked. Grandpa. Of all this. Gerald considered. I think he'd be proud. He wanted you to have roots, to know where you came from, but also to grow, to build something new while honoring what came before. That's a very wise answer, I said. I have my moments, Gerald replied. Denise found us then, pulled me onto the dance floor for one more song. I looked back at Gerald. He waved, smiling. Mom appeared beside him, rested her head on his shoulder. They looked content, whole. I'd spent years fighting against losing my father, fighting to keep his memory alive, fighting Gerald for taking up space in my mother's life. But watching them now, I understood something I'd been too young and angry to see before. You don't have to choose between your past and your future. You can hold both. You can honor what was while building what will be. My father was gone. That would always hurt. But Gerald was here. And Mom was happy. And I was married to someone extraordinary. And we were all doing our best to be family to each other. That's all anyone can do, really. Wake up every day and choose love. Even when it's complicated. Even when it's hard. Especially then. The night ended with everyone jumping into the lake fully clothed. Denise and I led the charge. Our wedding clothes probably ruined, but neither of us caring. The water was cold and perfect. Above us, stars scattered across the sky so clear it hurt to look at. This is everything, Denise said, treading water beside me. I know, I said. And I did. I knew it completely. In that moment, surrounded by everyone I loved in the place that connected me to my family's past, I understood that happiness doesn't look the way you think it will. It's messier, more complicated, built from pieces that don't quite fit together but somehow make a whole. Gerald stood on the dock wrapped in someone's jacket, laughing at us all. Mom beside him, her shoes already kicked off, considering whether to jump into. My father's memory woven through everything like light through water. Present but not heavy. There but not holding me down. I'd fought so hard to keep things exactly as they were. To freeze time at the moment before Dad died. To preserve his memory like a museum exhibit. But standing in that cold lake surrounded by joy and chaos, I finally understood. The best way to honor him wasn't to stop time. It was to keep living. To let new people in. To build new memories while keeping the old ones safe. That night, after everyone had left and the cleanup was done, Denise and I stayed at the lake house alone. We sat on the porch in borrowed clothes, watching the sun come up over the water. What are you thinking? She asked. I'm thinking about how life never goes the way you plan, I said. How you can fight and resist and try to control everything. But eventually, you have to let go and trust that things will work out. Very philosophical for someone who just got married, she teased. I'm allowed to be philosophical, I said. It's my wedding day. Technically, it's the day after, she pointed out. Fine, I said. I'm allowed to be philosophical the day after my wedding day. She kissed me, soft and sweet and familiar. We'd been together for 2 years, but somehow it still felt new, like we were constantly discovering each other. I love you, she said. I love you too, I replied. We stayed there until the sun was fully up, painting the lake in gold. Then we went inside to sleep in the bed my grandparents had shared, the house that held generations of my family's history, the place I'd fought to protect and had finally learned to share. And in the silence of that morning, I could almost hear my father's voice. Not the grieving memory I'd clung to, but the real him, the one Mom had told me stories about, the one who changed his major 3 times and failed and tried again, the one who would want me to be happy. I think he would have liked Denise. I think he would have eventually liked Gerald too. I think he would have been proud of me for fighting for what mattered, and then learning when to let go. But mostly, I think he would have been glad I found my way back to joy, that I didn't stay frozen in grief, that I built a life that honored his memory while making room for new love, new family, new beginnings. The lake house stood solid and strong, the way Grandpa had built it, ready for generations to come, ready for the children Denise and I might have someday, children who would learn to fish from that dock, who would hear stories about a grandfather they never met, and a great-grandfather who built something that lasted. That's what family is, really. Something you build that outlasts you. Something that grows and changes but holds its foundation. Something worth fighting for and also worth sharing. I'd learned that the hard way, through anger and grief and slowly letting go, through learning to see Gerald not as a replacement, but as an addition, through understanding that Mom's happiness didn't diminish Dad's memory. The sun climbed higher in the sky. Denise's breathing evened out beside me. Charlie scratched at the door, wanting breakfast. Life continued the way it always does, relentless and beautiful and complicated. And somewhere in the space between sleeping and waking, I felt at peace. With the past, with the present, with whatever came next. This was my family now, the one I was born into and the one I'd built. The memories of my father and the reality of Gerald, the love that came before and the love I'd found, all of it together, messy and imperfect and exactly right. The lake whispered against the shore. The house creaked in familiar ways, and I finally was home.